All right, my friends, we are going to continue with Chapter 3 of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Let's review, though, what we've learned as fantasy readers, what we should be doing. We have to figure out where the story takes place, think about the setting. Sometimes it changes as the story progresses, and when it is. We need to notice who has the power, and then have evidence to support that. Learn with the characters. Sometimes characters don't know what's going on. Are we learning along with them? Maybe keeping track of the problems is a struggle. So writing it down and writing down the different characters' problems, because in these more complex stories, there's multiple problems. And then remember, the last one we did was sometimes your first impression of a character changes. What you thought when they first started the book might not be what you think now. All right, so we're going to go on to Chapter 3. And Lucy has just returned from the wardrobe. And do you think anybody noticed that she was gone? I'm not so sure. I'm not sure. Here we go. Let's keep going. Chapter 3, Edmund and the Wardrobe. Lucy ran out of the empty room into the passage and found the other three. It's all right, she repeated. I've come back. What on earth are you talking about, Lucy? Asked Susan. Why, said Lucy in amazement, haven't you all been wondering where I was? So you've been hiding, have you? Said Peter. Poor little Lou, hiding and nobody noticed. You'll have to hide longer than that if you want. So you've been hiding. You'll have to hide longer than that if you want people to start looking for you. But I've been away for hours and hours, said Lucy. The others all stared at one another. Batty, said Edmund, tapping his head. Quite batty. What do you mean, Lou? Asked Peter. What I said, answered Lucy. It was just after breakfast when I went into the wardrobe, and I've been away for hours and hours, and had tea, and all sorts of things have happened. Don't be silly, Lucy, said Susan. We've only just come out of that room a moment ago, and you were there then. She's not being silly at all, said Peter. She's just making up a story for fun. Aren't you, Lou? And why shouldn't she? No, Peter, I'm not, she said. It's a magic wardrobe. There's a wood inside, and it's snowing, and there's a faun and a witch, and it's called Narnia. Come and see. So remember, the faun was supposed to turn in the daughter of Eve to the White Witch when he found her, but he didn't. He let Lucy go. So the others did not know what to think, but Lucy was so excited that they all went back with her into the room. She rushed ahead of them, flung open the door of the wardrobe, and cried, Now, go in and see for yourselves. Why, you goose, said Susan, putting her head inside and pulling the fur coats apart. It's just an ordinary wardrobe. Look, there's the back of it. Then everyone looked in and pulled the coats apart, and they all saw, Lucy herself saw, a perfectly ordinary wardrobe. There was no wood and no snow, only the back of the wardrobe with hooks on it. Peter went in and rapped his knuckles on it to make sure that it was solid. A jolly good hoax, Lou, he said, as he came out again, and you have really taken us in, I must admit. We half believed you. But it wasn't a hoax at all, said Lucy, really and truly. It was all different a moment ago. Honestly it was, I promise. Come on, Lou, said Peter. That's going a bit far. You've had your joke. Hadn't you better drop it now? Lucy grew very red in the face and tried to say something, though she hardly knew what she was trying to say, and burst into tears. For the next few days she was very miserable. She could have made it up with the others quite easily at any moment if she could have brought herself to say that the whole thing was only a story made up for fun. But Lucy was a very truthful girl, and she knew that she was really in the right, and she could not bring herself to say this. The others, who thought she was telling a lie, and a silly lie too, made her very unhappy. The two elder ones did this without meaning to do it, but Edmund could be spiteful. And on this occasion, he was spiteful. He sneered and jeered at Lucy and kept on asking her if she'd found any other new countries in the cupboards all over the house. What made it worse was that these days ought to have been delightful. The weather was fine, and they were out of doors from morning to night, bathing, fishing, climbing trees. I think bathing might be sunbathing or swimming, not taking a bath. Remember, this takes place a long time ago in England, so some words might be different. The weather was fine, and they were out of doors from morning to night, bathing, fishing, climbing trees, and lying in the heather. But Lucy could not properly enjoy any of it. And so things went on until the next wet day. That day, when it came to the afternoon and there was still no sign of a break in the weather, they decided to play hide and seek. Susan was it, and as soon as the others scattered to hide, Lucy went into the room where the wardrobe was. She did not mean to hide in the wardrobe because she knew that would only set the others talking again about the whole wretched business. But she did want to have one more look inside, for by this time she was beginning to wonder herself whether Narnia and the Faun had not been a dream. The house was so large and complicated and full of hiding places that she thought she would have time to have one look into the wardrobe and then hide somewhere else. But as soon as she reached it, she heard steps in the passage outside, and then there was nothing for it but to jump into the wardrobe and hold the door closed behind her. She did not shut it properly because she knew that it is very silly to shut oneself into a wardrobe, even if it is not a magic one. That's what she did last time, right? Now the steps she had heard were those of Edmund, and he came into the room just in time to see Lucy vanishing into the wardrobe. He had once decided to get into it himself, not because he thought it particularly a good place to hide, but because he wanted to go on teasing her about her imaginary country. My first impression of Edmund is not a good one. Remember, though, people change. He might grow, I'm not sure, but I'm not liking Edmund too much. He opened the door. There were the coats hanging up as usual, and a smell of mothballs, and the darkness and silence, and no sign of Lucy. She thinks I'm Susan to come to catch her, said Edmund to himself, and so she's keeping very quiet in the back. He jumped in and shut the door, forgetting what a very foolish thing this is to do. Then he began feeling about for Lucy in the dark. He had expected to find her in a few seconds and was very surprised when he did not. He decided to open the door again and let in some light, but he could not find the door either. He didn't like this at all and began groping wildly in every direction. He even shouted out, "Lucy! Lou, where are you? I know you're here." There was no answer, and Edmund noticed that his own voice had a curious sound. Not the sound you expect in a cupboard, but a kind of open-air sound. He also noticed that he was unexpectedly cold, and then he saw a light. "Thank goodness," said Edmund. "The door must have swung open out of its own accord." He forgot all about Lucy and went toward the light, which he thought was the open door of the wardrobe. But instead of finding himself stepping out into the spare room, he found himself stepping out from the shadow of some thick, dark fir trees into an open place in the middle of the wood. We're going to stop there. So Edmund has crossed over into Narnia himself. All right, we'll pick up tomorrow with the second half of chapter 3.